Hey, Planeteers, made it through Comic-Con, and yes, I did get socks. And if you count the Snake Eyes and Leo crossover I bought, I guess I got a G.I. Joe too after all. It was Christmas 1973 all over again. So what do you do after spending a week in San Diego walking so much you've made your Apple Watch nervous? You go to Disneyland. So I did. While I'm still awake, I want to talk about some comics from the last 2 weeks before the stack grows too large, or at least larger than it already is. Now, I'm Derek McCaw, and this is Fanboy Planet. Welcome back to the weekly stack, which is actually 3 weeks overdue because there was Comic Con. There was a couple of days to recover from Comic Con, and then went to Anaheim. Why? Because. Anyway, vacation is over, and I want to get through this stack and talk about some books from the last 2 weeks. Throw in one at least from Comic-Con, and there will be more because, of course, that's the thing about stacks. Not only do they grow with books that I buy every week, but I go to a con, I get, and I do mean this, I get the opportunity to buy a lot of indie books that maybe I didn't know existed at all. That happens, but also they're hard to find necessarily on the shelves. And I do have an interview coming up. We'll be editing with some publishers that are trying to circumvent that, and so I do want to talk about that. There's some very clever things being worked on in distribution, and I do hope they work because there are some good books out there that, well, I can't say none of us ever see, but they're hard to see, but they might get easier now. So every week, more or less, I go to House of Secrets in Burbank, California. I buy the books that I have ordered through the catalogs and then scour the shelves to see what else I might have missed, or that people have told me, hey, this is a really cool book, see if you can find it. And more often than not, I can find it after people have told me, and that's really cool too. So I read a few, talk about why I did that, and what draws me to these books. So before I go further, of course, if you enjoy being part of this conversation, which I realize seems a little bit one way at the moment, that's the nature of parasocial relationships. Please like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Certainly follow on fanboyplanet.com because I have other things going on there too, as well as these videos. I'm going to get one out of the way right now that I admit I have somewhat mixed emotions about, not because it's not a good book. It is a good book, but because, of course, as I'm taunting what it is, one of my Act One comic book writing credits was The Greatest American Hero. And last week at comic shops, The Greatest American Hero from AMP Comics, #1 was released. And I know they had a Kickstarter that I guess I didn't back, and I don't know why I didn't. I think I just didn't get the alert. And that's okay because I knew it was going to be in shops. They're calling it a graphic novel. At Comic-Con, the writer, hang on, I'm going to put the glasses on so I can do right by this. The writer, Don Hanfield, who's also the CEO of AMP Comics, and created the story with Tanya McKiernan, who I think is Stephen J. Cannell's daughter, one of the daughters that I met at Comic-Con. And you have the right to use Bill Katz's image likeness. That's what we call it, right? And I presume Robert Culp's, I don't know, Connie Selica as well. But of course, this is many years later. I mean, and quite literally in terms of the continuity. And I really like that approach. I guess what makes it hard for me right now, and I can go ahead and take off the glasses, is that the creation of the version of the Greatest American Hero comic that came out from Arcana Comics and Catastrophic Comics, which was the company that Bill co-owned with Chris Foligno, it was a tumultuous time. I learned a lot. There are pages that I'm really happy happened, and overall, I'm happy that book existed. I think, however, I'll be, perfectly honest, as I said, I think this take is a better idea overall. Through the comic we did before, Bill and I had come up with, some things that he wanted to move forward, what the suit could do, and we kind of got to do a cliffhanger of that, and that was it. And I think, honestly, speaking honestly about it, the mistake we made was basically telling an updated version of the original pilot episode and setting it in 2006, I think, was the year we got the first issue out. And to some people, that felt like, well, we were just kind of running in place. And it seemed like a good idea at the time because we thought, well, we're reintroducing the character to a bunch of new readers. As it turned out, probably weren't, probably just older viewers who loved the show as a kid were buying this too. And so I think this book is applying and appealing more to them. All right. So again, you want to say, so in this version, it is Ralph has been gone. Ralph Hinckley has been gone from the earth for an undetermined so far period of time. He's aged. He's the same age as Bill Catt, so somewhere in the 70s. And he had left his son behind, and it was not a good relationship. So that, strikes, hard for me as a parent of now adult children. Like, did you do right? Are they still connected? So I really like that take. It's still a little bit unclear as to why Ralph has been with the aliens and he comes back and he still doesn't know that much more about the suit. And that, I admit, is not a flaw in the concept. I mean, that's why people loved it. It was a guy with superpowers that didn't know how to use them fully. But after all this time, you kind of think maybe he would. I don't know. Look, that's it. I don't want to pick it apart because I think Don Hanfeld did a really good job writing this. The artist I did mention, right? No, I did not. Alper Giggle, and colored by Faradia Nurmaleso. And I think the coloring is fantastic. And it's lettered by DC Hopkins. Bill, sorry, he is Bill to me. William Catt is kind of like executive producing, which means he had some input, but I don't know, where exactly. It's not a writing credit, so I don't know. But I think he was a good writer of comics, so who knows? Anyway, my mixed emotion is really more about coverage of this book than what really, how the book itself exists. I think the art is good. The coverage was, when this was first announced, and I don't know who started it, probably Bleeding Cool, that we didn't have the rights to the likenesses of the actors, which I think was unfair. We did. We had a lot of plans. Didn't happen for various reasons, but that's okay. That is life. But we had the rights to likeness. The artist Clint Helinski did, I think, a really good job capturing the likenesses of the main three. I think this almost went too far the other way to make a big deal out of having the likeness rights. And really, at this point, it's just Bill Catt's likeness that matters, because there's only like a billboard that mentions Connie Selleck's character, Pam. And I think there's a quick memory shot of Robert Culp. And so it's hard to tell, but this goes the other way, where it's kind of like J.K. Woodward over on the Star Trek books, where I know exactly who they're supposed to be, but it's almost like it's too complicated. Maybe Clint went the other way. It was almost too simplistic for some people as far as the images, but I can tell you, I know that Robert Culp was happy, and I know that Connie Sellecca was happy, and I know that William Catt was happy because William Catt was working on the book with us. There were several people involved in writing, and as I think I talked to Don Hanfeld briefly, and he said, the TV writers' room. Yeah, that was almost what happened. And on a comic book, I don't know if that always ends up, resulting in the best book, but whatever. I'm happy that it existed. I'm happy that this version exists. And if you don't, if you're not a fan of the original show, I think you can still get in here because it's really a story about a man who walked away from his responsibility as a father, whether or not he was supposed to save the world, right? And so, they set up some interesting conflicts. I'm intrigued to see where it goes. I did read this at Comic Con because I bought the exclusive Comic Con edition, so I could read it, which I think it came out like a week before it was available in stores. So I did enjoy it, and it led me to another book, from AMP Comics, which is another one I don't see very often on the stands, and I'm not even sure how many books they have. But as a result, I bought the trade of the Never Wars, which I think I'd seen like an issue 3 of it, and it has, by its nature, 3 different storytelling paths because it's the kind of Oz, it's Wonderland, and it's Neverland, all 3 combined. And so they have a Peter Pan track, an Alice track, and a Dorothy track. When I say that, it's like characters related to those characters. So I really, really dug. I have not finished it yet. It's a pretty thick tome, and believe it or not, no pun intended, you have to tell a really gripping story to me, or a really good, different kind of story using familiar characters like that for me to really get into it. Like Oz, I love Oz. I have found many television updates, we'll just leave them unnamed, not particularly great. I get too that the musical from 1939, if you are an Oz purist, and there people are, it's enchanting in a different way. It's not necessarily all that accurate to the books, nor is Wicked for that matter. I mean, I like Wicked for what it is. So again, you have to have that twist. Neverland Wars sets it firmly in World War One, and this is the thing that's been getting to me lately. My grandfather on my father's side was one of the first paratroopers at the tail end of World War One, and what little research or little evidence of him being there that I can find, implies that he served in Siberia. And I just think, World War One, America kind of overlooks, as we tend to, how traumatic that was for an entire generation. And this takes familiar characters like Peter, like Dorothy. There's the grandson of Alice, because yes, smartly, right? Alice was much older, so it's a couple generations past by the time you get to World War One, and the trauma of what was going on in that war is right there. And then they get sucked into back to their respective imaginary places, if you want to call them that. So I'm hooked on this, and I think, and the artwork there is great too. So I AMP Comics, I haven't seen many, and I don't know if there's much beyond the Greatest American Hero and Neverland War, but I'm going to keep an eye out because these are quality things. And again, that's what I love about a con, right? I don't know that I would have necessarily stumbled across the trade paperback at House of Secrets, because again, that's not a reflection on House of Secrets. It's that I'm still awkward with the catalogs. I was able to do pool lists before, and previews made it simple. It's not simple anymore, and I get that. And so, you do have to seek these things out. And so that's one reason I do this, because I'm recommending this absolutely. Let me get another one out of the way. Swamp Thing 91, which wraps up the so-called Swamp Thing 89, which is Rick Veitch going to get back in time to 1989, when he did something controversial, introduced Jesus in a storyline with Swamp Thing, and DC Publishing got a little nervous. And now that I've read the whole thing, and assuming that the scripts are much as he had intended originally, I don't get the controversy. I guess that the implication was that Jesus was more a magician, but if you understand DC cosmology, that's no small thing. And I get it. By nature of comics, you kind of have to. It's an awkward relationship with theology. You have to acknowledge that people are Christian, that people are Jewish, that people are Muslim and Zoroastrian, and I know I'm going to miss other people, Hindu, um, and you don't want to mock anybody's particular sense of where we all fit in this universe, but you still also got to tell good stories. And somebody's got, when you have a character like the demon running around, well, obviously there's a hell. So what's on the other side there? I think, like over at Marvel, if you haven't read the Immortal Hulk yet, what's wrong with you? The Immortal Hulk, that is a huge storyline by Al Ewing that is absolutely trying to wrestle with that. Is like, where do things fit? What does immortality mean in a universe full of Marvels, if you will? And so over here is Swamp Thing. Now the solution that Rick Veitch enters into, and I don't know if that was the original intent way back in 1989, but the solution is interesting, that allows everything else that's happened to have happened exactly the way some of us read all the way through, right? I've been a Swamp Thing fan since, well, I can't say since the beginning, but picked one up at 7-Eleven, either that or a cousin gave me an issue. It was later in it, but I was definitely with Swamp Thing from the saga of the Swamp Thing revival that was Martin Pascoe and Tom Yates, which was beautiful. It was interesting. And then I was there when Alan Moore created the anatomy lesson and came in and blew all our minds. So I was there all the way to the end, past Rick Veitch and all that. Veitch, I don't know. So again, if somebody knows that pronunciation, please. I've never met him, so I've not had to awkwardly mispronounce his name. The next one I want to talk about is the Superman Year 1000 2026 annual. I guess it's the Superman 2026 annual, Year 1000. It's listed as a number one as part of the All In, and I don't know if that's the thing that DC is going to do each year. It's going to be a number one, because it's 2026. It'll be 2027. Will there always be a subtitle? I don't know. But it has title of story, Whatever Happened to the Omega Champion. And this is the aftermath of DCKO, and we're into Next Level. And I know there's another event coming. And so, this is Superman at the end of DCKO basically had to be confronted with the reality that, yeah, he's immortal and he's going to outlive everybody. Now, DC 1 Million years ago from Grant Morrison kind of resolved that question as well. But hey, let's get over there. And there are things like the Book of L miniseries that's going on right now. It also covers this kind of interestingly, what is the legacy of Superman? And now Superman's dealing with the issue of what is the legacy when he just keeps going. And they've given kind of a little Kirby-esque design over him. I love that. But more importantly for comic fans, this opens up the possibilities for the Legion of Superheroes, which we know there's going to be a Next Level book of Legion of Superheroes, and opening the door for a lot of options. I say Legion of Superheroes is one of the first titles that I sought out on my own. Like, you're a little kid, you pretty much just get the books that people give you, or you go to a store and say, like, a Stuckey's. These were, cross country family trips. What's at the Stuckey's? And yeah, I just absolutely made myself old. But, you stop at these places and you buy whatever comics are there, whatever the cover looks good. And I don't even know if people editorially think that the cover matters that much, other than variant covers, because I now have 3 different covers for Greatest American Hero number 1. That was not on purpose. And yet I kind of like that I do. I don't know. Anyway, so I love the Legion of Superheroes. And it was Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes when I started reading comics. on my own, I should say, people would buy me comics and read them to me, and then I learned to read, and I loved everything about them. Even now, like, I was there when Dave Cockrum was drawing them. Mike Grell came in, and I still remember, I think it was Carrie Bates that did this, maybe it was Paul Levitz, who changed the slang, the futuristic slang. 1,000 years in the future, they're going to say "cool up" instead of "calm down." So hey, cool up. Anyway, why does that stick in my head? I don't know. Maybe those will be my last words, and everybody will wonder why. Anyway, so you've got all these options, and I've seen a lot of different reboots of the Legion of Superheroes, and I think, oddly enough, probably the most restricted reboot in terms of like what characters could be used, etc., was Mark Waid and Barry Kitson did one that has turned out to be kind of the most prescient, because its vision of the future is kind of here, and it was long before here. So anyway, I've really enjoyed the Legion in all its incarnations, and some I've loved more than others. I love the Silver Age version. I love the animated version too, because there was a Justice League and the Fatal Five or something like that. What was that title? A movie that kind of closed the door on the Bruce Timm universe, but brought in the Legion, and so I'm excited to see what happens. And Superman Year 1000 2026 annual #1. I don't know how they're gonna. Anyway, I enjoyed it. I know I'm kind of rushing over like some of the talent involved, and I apologize. I'll get back to it. Dread the Hall H, the 2026 edition from Image Comics, is an anthology of. It was originally horror stories, right? Connected to a convention that looks very much like Comic-Con, because if you say Hall H, that is the big 6,000 capacity hall at the end of the San Diego Convention Center. Yet in this book, they make it they name it something else. So it's not really Comic-Con, but it's Comic-Con. And they have a running gag with a rogue, essentially a collectible like a Funko that is inexplicably sentient, and it's okay. Anyway, it's a fun book. I loved last year's version. I like this year's version. Chris Ryall. All right, I'll put the magic glasses on to cover all this. Jordan Hart, Chris Ryall, Luana Vecchio, Charles P. Wilson III, Mariana Ignacy, Tom Williams, and Chris Anderson. And it was fun. So, I know that sort of like Dread the Halls was like, it was a Christmas horror anthology. I like that, for us that are comics fans, late July, that is our holiday season. So I love that we have books that are going to tweak that. So Dread the Hall H, the 2026, it still says it is #1. So last year said #1 too, but this is, anyway, let's get to one. I'm going to wrap up with Titan Comics, and there was some exciting news out of Titan last week at Comic-Con, which is that in 2027, they're going to be doing some Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff. And the reason I get excited about that is because I know that Heroic Signatures has been putting together all the Robert E. Howard books, and Titan, pretty much distributes, I don't know, they might see it a little differently, but regardless, those books have been incredible, and this is one of them that I'm about to talk about. And to see Edgar Rice Burroughs' creations getting a similar treatment, and they'll roll it out slowly because you can't just like unleash them all at once, because obviously Titan didn't do that with Conan either. So I mean, there's Conan the Barbarian, there's books, and then they slowly expanded what characters could be there. So you can read about that on Fanboy Planet a little bit. We know that in 2027 there will be a Deja Thoris #1. I don't exactly know when a Tarzan of the Apes will be there, but it's going to be. And I'm hoping they'll be able to talk with the people at Titan a little more about that and find out more info. But as always with those things, they'll tell us when they're good and ready. I think we were lucky enough that they said, oh yeah, we're going to do Deja Thoris. But so the book that I want to talk about is Solomon Kane. So I got to put on my magic glasses for this to make sure that I give all the credit where credit is due, right? Solomon Kane, The Lion Errant, #1. Writer, artist, and colorist, all is Patrick Zurcher, who is an artist that I always liked. And just as a creator, he's become so vibrant in the last couple of years. I mean, he probably already was, but he's gotten the shot to show what he can do. And he obviously loves Solomon Kane, which is the Robert E. Howard character that I bought. Probably that was the only Marvel Robert E. Howard book that I bought. Why I don't know. I just love the idea of it. And Richard Starkings and Comic Craft's Tyler Smith did the lettering. Chris Butera is the editor. I do have to call out again Richard Starkings, just absolutely, and Comic Craft, obviously, his company has really made lettering so overtly an art form within these books. It's terrific. It's terrific. But I just want to call it out because I don't think I do a good enough job of recognizing and calling out when lettering really stands out. So I'm doing it because I bought a book from Richard Starkings at Comic-Con. I got to read it. But Patrick Zurcher on the Solomon Kane, he had done one last year. So they're doing, we know it's not as well known a character as Conan the Barbarian. There's only one movie. I bet you didn't even know there was one movie adaptation of Solomon Kane. There is. And he's made it interesting to a point of like, I really got to go back and read some of the stories. I have them somewhere, but I've got Kindle issues, as maybe some people also have and can tell me. Anyway, so I gotta do a deeper dive into how Robert E. Howard wrote the original Solomon Kane stories. He's not as dour here as he was in what I remember of the Marvel comics that I'd bought. He is a lot more complicated than the average, description of, if I tell you it's a Puritan with a sword, you're going, yawn. It's more than that, but also more importantly, Zurcher has taken these stories and really showing the global reach of, it's not our world, but at least the geography is more recognizable than the Hyborian Age would be. And, because it's 17th century Europe and Africa and India, South Asia, and, all this. So I really, really have enjoyed the Solomon Kane work that has been both in Savage Sword of Conan. And then it promises at the end of this first issue that issue number 2 has a cover by Liam Sharp. And, Liam Sharp's work is just incredible. So I'm so excited for that. So before I go, I do get to thank Jim Owsley, a friend from Red 5 Comics, for putting me on the panel Devils and Dreamscapes at Comic-Con. And to Jerry Huntman, the publisher of IPI Comics, who put me on a panel moderating about what IPI had coming and getting to talk with some people that I do, that are definitely friends, with thanks to them. And at the Devils and Dreamscapes panel, I was able to acknowledge the next thing that I'm writing professionally, which is a story in an anthology called Billy the Kid's Weird West. And I'm so excited to be able to say that Ryan Samuel Carr, whose work has knocked me out, he did an graphic novel adaptation of George A. Romero's The Amusement Park last year. He and I are collaborating on a story for this anthology, and I cannot wait to share everything I can about it. There will be a Kickstarter, so you can still go back to Horror Not Hate, which is no longer Kickstarted, but we've got digital copies and print copies are on the way. I do know that's true. It's just, do you see what's happening in the world and how hard it is to get things? Like, if you got them printed in China, it's getting hard to get these things back. So trying. Anyway, so I have a Kickstarter coming there, and I do have a story. I get to connect this to Robert E. Howard. I have a prose story in an anthology that will be available by November 1st, is what I'm told. Maybe will be released the week before in time for Halloween, in an anthology called Strange Eons 2026. Strange Eons is an annual anthology, and the subtitle this year so far is Weirder Tales. And why it's connected to Robert E. Howard is that my story is, well, let's just put it at this point that Chris Butera read it and liked it and said, no, I cannot use this in Savage Sword of Conan. And I said, no, I completely understand. I did not intend you to use this in Savage Sword of Conan. So, anyway, more on that as it develops, working on another story. And, it was a good Comic-Con. I'm just so bloody tired, although the polo shirt breathes very nicely. So there you go. Thank you for sticking with me again. And like I said, like and subscribe. I know that sounds needy, but that really is how YouTube recommends things. And they go, how popular is this? So it is kind of important. And if I'm saying things that you like, well, let's say more, or I believe the kids today now say less, and that makes no sense to me, but that's okay because you know who I am. Anyway, write in editor@fanboyplanet.com, or you can make a comment on the video below. Occasionally people do that, and as I said, like and subscribe. I think I've been repetitive. So remember, use your powers for good.